Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me to talk about ethics and software testing. Now, if we're talking about ethics, we are talking about questions like what's the best way for people to live and which actions are right or wrong in particular circumstances. And there are a few things that I personally believe to be right in any circumstance, and I want to use this stage to quickly introduce you to them. First of all, trans rights are human rights. Everybody must have the same rights regardless of their gender, gender expression, or sexual preference. Their body, their choice. It's not up to men or governments to regulate what people who can get pregnant may do with their body. And finally, we can only progress as a society if we prioritize the most vulnerable. And that's where we as IT professionals come in. With every limitation that we accept, with every feature that we implement, we can ask ourselves, are we supporting or are we harming vulnerable people? It may not always feel like it, but we have power. And as you will see in this talk, this also requires us to look at ethics a bit more closely. Now, before I start with the content, there's one final thing. All the statements and opinions presented during this talk are the personal opinions of the presenter only and don't necessarily reflect those of his employer or other organizations. This talk also comes with a content warning. I will have examples of emotional manipulation, injury, and death. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, I suggest you leave. Okay, but now, please close your eyes and imagine the following situation. It's a Saturday morning in summer. You've slept really well. Warm temperatures and birdsong are calling you to go out and enjoy the world. But somehow, you feel a bit dull. So you pick up your phone and open Facebook to read some good news from your friends to maybe lift the mood. But the more you read, the more you get the impression that the world has become a sad place. So you stay in bed. You can open your eyes now. With the current events in the world, it's easy to get the impression that everything has taken a turn for the worse. But in 2014, Facebook actually aggravated this by running an experiment on their platform. They wanted to see if emotions can be contagious in social networks. So they filtered the news feed of some users to either show more positive or more negative news. And then they monitored what those users were posting. Now, the good news is that, yes, it did work. Those emotions were contagious. The bad news is nobody had ever asked the users if they want to be part of this experiment. Is this behavior, is running such an experiment, ethically sound? Another story that made the headlines was a small group of testers that decided that it's not enough to test the software and hardware in a well-defined test environment, but instead they took it out to the harsh customer reality. They had to adapt their testing tools, but they were richly rewarded. Yep, I'm talking about the emission scandal that plagued quite a few car manufacturers. What amazes me about this is that the software that made the car behave differently under different circumstances, it worked perfectly. That's quite an achievement. But at the same time, I can't help but wonder, why didn't anybody stop this from happening? The damage this caused to the reputation and the finances of those companies was massive. And that's ignoring the environmental impact and the impact to people's health that this had. How could it come to this? But okay, maybe you're not working for a social network, maybe you're not in automotive. There's another example. Imagine working in a highly regulated environment and having a successful product out in the market. However, that product requires extensive training. Now, customer demand changes, so you have to adapt the hardware, which would mean retraining. But to have an advantage over your competitors, you just add a software solution that kind of makes the new hardware act like the old one. During testing in a hardware simulator, your test engineers discover that there is a problem with the software solution, but they just complain amongst themselves in a chat, and that's about it. Yep, Boeing 737 MAX and the MCAS system. The head test pilot figured out that the MCAS system is running rampant in the sim on him. I'm like, what? Those are his words. But nothing else happened about it. He told his coworkers, That's it. Didn't inform regulators, didn't inform anyone else. In the end, it took 2 plane crashes and 346 people to die until Boeing finally admitted that they have a problem there. Now, yes, we can talk about the ethical implications of making such a product decision, but I'm wondering about why could the testers act that way? If you figure out such a problem in your product, and it's going to impact so many people, how can you not fight tooth and nail for a fix? Is that behavior of the testers ethical? But okay, maybe you're also not working in aviation. You don't have to be. There's a software called G4U, Ghosting for Unix. It's a really small tool that allows you to clone computer hard disks. IT departments love that stuff because they can set up computers the exact same way. And that software has a license agreement with a sentence, "No license fees are requested except for military and related uses." Harmless enough. Well, in fact, the developer was contacted by Boeing, Airbus, NATO service providers, and the US Nuclear Security Administration. That's the people overlooking the nuclear weapons arsenal of the US. They all wanted to use the software. Now, we don't know if they wanted to use it to clone Office PCs, or if they wanted to use it to set up fighter jets. Having that license statement there allowed the developer to ask about it, to clarify what they're going to do with it, and to grant a license or not. And all of those companies have lawyers. They will not let you use the software without having the license. Should we all have similar license agreements so that we can make that case-by-case decision? And this is not just my brainchild. In 2020, the US Department of Defense proudly announced that they updated code on a U-2 fighter plane in flight thanks to Kubernetes. Now, I wonder if the people working on Kubernetes ever consider this use case, and if they're fine with it. Final story. In 2015, I was at EclipseCon Europe, and a person from BMW Car IT had a talk on cars and the Internet of Things. And one of the things he said was, in case of an accident with autonomously driving cars, the cloud will decide if you break an arm or a leg. Now, I came up with 5 reasons right away why this will never work, but the words kept lingering in my brain. And it was thanks to a Twitter exchange with Alex Schladerbeck that I figured out why. Because I don't want to be responsible for making that decision. I don't want to work on software that makes this decision. And as she said it, interesting and scary things are coming for us in the future. What's our position as software testers on that? Do we all not have to take care of functional and non-functional requirements, but also about the ethical implications of the stuff we're working on? Is ethicality even a non-functional requirement? Now, I have a pretty good feeling how I would have acted in those situations. I would have tried to stop all of that from happening, obviously. But would that have worked? Would my boss have listened to me if I tell him this is not the right thing to do? Especially if all the reason I can give is that that's my gut feeling that we're doing something wrong here. So I was looking for ethics standards or something that I could refer to convince my boss. And I was also wondering about this idea of ethicality being a non-functional requirement. Now, luckily, we have ISO 9126, which lists all the different functional and non-functional requirements. And there's lots of ilities, but there's no ethicality in there. I learned about that ISO standard as part of my ISTQB certified tester training. So I looked back at my training material that I still had to see if there's anything about ethics in there. There's not. But the syllabus is online, so I looked through the different versions, and I figured out that in 2010, ISTQB actually introduced the topic of ethics into the syllabus, and I was really happy. Then they removed it again in 2018. Yeah. But at least the syllabus gave me a pointer because they mentioned an ISTQB code of ethics. Finally, some proper Google term. And with that, I figured out there are multiple codes of ethics that can apply to us as software testers and IT professionals. There's the IEEE code of ethics, There's an ACM code of ethics, which is the Association of Computing Machinery. Never heard of them before. There's the ISTQB code of ethics, obviously. And as with many things, James Bach also wrote a blog post on his thoughts towards the ethics of testing. And I'll quickly go over those. So the IEEE code of ethics is short. It's kind of readable, 10 points. From engineers, for engineers, short, precise, you're done. If you look at the ACM code of ethics, that's the first chapter. There are 3. You can't read it, it's fine. But if you look at the headlines, they are pretty similar to what the IEEE has. So if IEEE is too short for you, look at the ACM, it's way more verbose. Also, this code of ethics has been updated in 2018, which apparently never happens, because it's the only one that has had that happen. The ISTQB code of ethics, I have issues with that. My main issue is all the codes of ethics apply to the members of the organizations, obviously. But that's the only code of ethics that mentions in every single sentence that you have to be a certified software tester. Not everyone wants to be. Could we make this a bit more inclusive, maybe? All right. And then we have what James Bach wrote. This is, I recommend it if you're a test consultant or if the other ones are too non-testy for you, then look at those. I personally prefer the ACM code of ethics. So cool. Now I had something I really like, and that's an oracle. I could use those codes of ethics as an oracle for discussions and to inform my ethicality testing. But still, that leaves me with a difficult topic of having to convince others that what we're doing here is unethical. And I don't know if you've ever had those discussions, but they can get pretty heated pretty quickly. After all, we're discussing ethics. We're discussing something that touches on our core values. Luckily, there is a way to discuss ethics that takes the heat out a bit, and it's called the Toolman schema. It works like that. First of all, you start off with a data point. Tobias hit a test result. Then you pick a warrant, which could be the ACM code of ethics, which says be open, honest, and trustworthy, to come to a conclusion. Now, that was not open, not honest, not trustworthy, so what I did was wrong. But it's not that easy, because we have to have a backing. We have to explain why this code of ethics even applies. Now, I just told you that I like it, so OK, it applies to me. Good. And then there's one more thing that I love even more than an oracle, and that's an exception. So we can have a rebuttal. So maybe the test result came from a flaky test or from malicious test data or whatever. The benefit of this schema is that it takes us away from discussing I feel and you feel to I use this warrant with this backing and maybe with that rebuttal. And you use a different warrant, and let's talk about why that is. Maybe I think our company should operate under the ACM code of ethics, you think it shouldn't. And that takes the heat out and allows for way better conversations. Now, let's take a quick look at the examples that I showed in the beginning and use the ACM code of ethics to see if that code of ethics could have triggered discussions. We're going with Facebook manipulating users' emotions. ACM says we should contribute to society and human well-being and protect each individual's right to autonomy. If you mess with my emotions, you're not contributing to my well-being. And if you do it without my consent, you're also not protecting my right to autonomy. There we have our point for discussion. Emotions, contributing to society and human well-being also includes having a safe natural environment. Emissions that are way through the roof don't contribute to that. But also, we should be honest and trustworthy. We should not make false or misleading claims like saying our cars emit very few emissions. There we have points for discussion as well. Boeing, we should avoid harm, which also means that we should follow generally accepted best practices. And I'm not an expert in aviation, but I know there's usually redundancy planned in everything they do. MCAS was not redundant. That's why it failed. And we should be honest and trustworthy, which means providing full disclosure of all problems to the appropriate parties, which is not what the tests pilot did in this case. G for U with a military license. Again, we're back to avoiding harm, because Well-intended actions may lead to harm. Maybe you've built the best hard disk cloning software in the world. Still means it can lead to harm. So we can make up our minds, how can we protect our users and everyone else from that? Finally, that's a tough one. The cloud decides which body part of mine is injured. If that cloud algorithm is really that good, that it knows that it's better for me to break my leg than my arm because I'm working with computers and broken arms are bad for that, then yes, this is totally in line with the code of ethics. Then again, I don't know about Hungary, but I know about Germany. We have dead spots on the Autobahn where you don't have any cloud connection, so maybe doing it in the cloud is not the best idea. Once again, we have a point for discussion. So, where do we go from here? What does all of that mean? I see us testers evolving from kind of the blocking quality police to more supporting quality advocates and quality assistants. Should we now become the ethics police? Definitely not. But what I know is that testers and test-infected developers tend to be the ones asking critical questions anyway. So what we could do is keep raising awareness of ethical problems. We could be the ones that figure out in their area of influence, do we even agree on a common code of ethics? Maybe we're not. Then you can fight all you want for making your features ethical, but if nobody else agrees with you, you're lost. That's something we can do. We can keep this topic in everyone's minds. So, how can we move this forward? First of all, inform yourself about ethics. Hopefully, this talk gave you a few pointers where to look at, gave you a few ideas. Read the codes of ethics that I mentioned. Yes, ACM is long, but it's great. Talk about ethics. Talk about it with your coworkers, with your friends, with your family, I don't know. Tell them I was at a conference and some guy on stage mentioned planes crashing and how that's not good. Raise awareness wherever you can. But most important of all, keep ethics. And the toolman schema, I know it was quick, you will get the slides. Keep that in mind when you get back to work and see if and how you can apply that there. After all, ethics are relevant for all of us. And as a parting thought, before we get to the question, there's one more thing I would like to mention. And I hear that a lot from the audience. Yeah, but if we don't build it, someone else will. And I get that, but I have a counterpoint to that. You refusing to do something and, if you can, being vocal about it allows others to refuse it as well. And we've seen that already. We've seen that employees at Amazon had ethical concerns about working for the US military, and they raised concerns, and they made it very public, which in turn made people at Microsoft also raise their concerns. We can support each other in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tobias. So, questions. You are a great teacher. What would you say is the most common programming language to test with?
The one that gets the job done. I don't know what you're all working with, which programming languages, and to be fair, in my career, I've learned to not care. I'm able to learn, I'm able to collaborate with people, to pair with people, whatever gets the job done.
Cool. How would you bring in the topic ethics to a retrospective?
Great question, thank you. So first of all, I feel like ethics is a bit, having ethics in retrospective is a bit late because then you're already done with stuff. So I'd rather have ethics early in the development process when we're talking about features and requirements, and then we not all. I mean, we do talk about the functionality and non-functional requirements when we are talking about new features, we should talk about ethics there as well. Because sitting in a retrospective and saying, hey, we implemented these cool features, and by the way, I think that was not a good idea, is a bit late. Not exactly an answer, but I hope it helps.
So as we're testing, no, as early as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Bring this in as early in your development process as you can.
Okay, how about the ethics of companies, like gambling, evil corporations?
Oh, yes, thank you. So this goes out to the HASTEF organizers. I have a wonderful workshop on this topic where we'll touch on this. Have me back. As I said, ethics are also your core values. If you're fine with working for a gambling company, I'm not the one to judge you. I personally wouldn't, but also I wouldn't work on a cloud algorithm that breaks my leg, right? That's my ethics. And I don't know how you define evil corporations. I think let's meet during lunch and we'll have a 1-hour discussion if we have the same understanding there. It's up to you.
And where did you get the T-shirt?
Evil Corp?
It's there.
Where did you get that T-shirt? That's a wonderful organization called the Ministry of Testing. They do great T-shirts, but a lot more. Can I say that they run conferences? But they also do online training. They have a great community, and they offer this T-shirt, yes. And you support a good cause with it as well. So everybody, get that.
Okay, and the second half of the question, is there anything that we can do to get these bodies to update their codes of ethics?
Brilliant question. Heckle them, potentially. To be fair, I haven't tried that, because I was really happy that the ACM updated theirs, and looking at what they have in there, you can see between the old and the new version that they understood that technology has changed, that there are things like AI, for example, and we should take that into consideration. But yeah, basically try to heckle the ISTQB. Why not?
Okay, my favorite question. Shall I quit my job if the company is acting unethical?
I love that question, thank you. Once again, I'm not going to say yes. I'm going to say it's up to you. But it's also up to the circumstances and the position you're in. So, do you feel like you can have a positive influence? Do you feel like you can move your company towards acting in a more ethical way? Do you feel like you have the capacity to do that? Then I would like it if you stay, because we need more ethical companies. But if you feel like you're in no position to do that, or if you feel really uncomfortable there, then draw your own conclusions from that.
Okay. I would like to say thanks a lot for the presentation. Another round of applause, please, for our great presenter.